Yo internet, as I said in the last video, took the Fusion to Honda Musselman Circuit and didn't go so well. Had another control arm failure. Kind of looks worse than it is. Honda Musselman isn't a very high-speed track, so it immediately came to my attention when it did fail. This time it failed, well, now that my dumbass decided to still strap this wheel to the trailer, lacking some gussets in the crotch area of that control arm. So I have a couple ideas for a game plan, because this is getting a little old. The car, even when it was out there and not broken, it drove like pretty much shit. It was over centering, like I came around a corner, full lock, and the wheels didn't want to come out of full lock. So before I could get like a GoPro in the engine bay to see what it was doing, decided to just push on, and then this happened. So moving forward, as I'm sure you saw the new livery on that video I just posted a little while ago, I think I'm gonna take all the fenders off, keep the bumper off, either put stock Mustang arms and stock knuckles, because I do have those items, see how it drives, drift it like that, or make drift spec arms for or with the stock Mustang offset, which was going to put the wheel just about there. So then if that works really well, then I'll make the body work accordingly. I mean, besides that, and going through these fenders, good thing these cars are so common. I can find a whole bunch of these in white in the valley. All the systems, other than the one control arm that is like probably the pinnacle of all the custom work in the suspension anyway, everything's working great. That Musselman was a pretty tight course. First gear, and the first gear in that 60/60 is pretty tall. I could do it in first gear, but it was wound tight and no wheel speed. It was about 90 degrees out or so, but the car did stay cool. I never saw it go over 200 degrees, and no other complaints really, just this steering business. So, been talking to my guy Justin, and other people. Alex Anderson, is always good to bounce ideas off of as well, to kind of figure out this whole situation, because I've drifted cars or Mustangs that are based on this front suspension, S197. They drift great out of the box, even without angle kit. So we just got to figure this out. So that's the growing pains of a build like this. I try to make everything as modular, so every part is off the shelf. So of course, the one part that's not off the shelf is giving us grief. And it kind of roots back to, and there's no real easy way to remedy this, is to have the engine and the whole drivetrain back 3 inches. Now, I've thought about this like in bed at night. Could I do that? Well, all of this would have to be pushed back, more firewall work, and so on and so forth. I really like how it looks in here. It doesn't look like it's too far forward. I've seen a Coyote in a 240 that I swear the last bank of cylinder is like with the strut tower, it's really far forward. So I think as far as where it is to like the axle center line, it's pretty good. So doing body work and making some fenders work with the wheels offset even more forward and having it drive well might be the key. So what I'm gonna have to do is make some arms, just go test it without fenders because I'm sick of wadding them up, and go from there, because it should drive in theory. It is frustrating, don't get me wrong, but that's what I'm gonna do. So if I can get it to drive well with stock Mustang offset, as far as the ball joint pickup we're talking, it'll be probably 3 inches longer in width. It might even go shorter because the camber was a little out of control. It's about 7 degrees this time. and then figure out a fender solution and a bumper. Bumper's plastic, that'll trim fine. It's just gonna look weird. I'm probably gonna have to add like some flares to kind of take up a gap that's gonna be here and then kind of make it even, so it'll look aesthetically okay. So, whew, kind of a bit of a rant, but I mean, everybody likes the car and I'm not afraid to show the failures. This is the reality. So I'm gonna take a break here. It's Sunday. Got everything unloaded this morning. Car still looks pretty good with this new wrap, and go from there. So maybe stick around. Apart. I'm off to FD, Texas in a couple days, and been really beating cheeks on this car lately. So nice to be able to take it easy because I don't really have any real deadlines with the car now. Alright, so front end is completely apart again. Got the control arms out of there, and you can see got a little action on the side skirt and the pinch weld. The fender is thoroughly effed. Other one's still okay. So, but my plans are, which I will reveal later, is to get a sort of over fender. Did show you the failure actually. So that was the driver's side. The driver's side broke last time, but I don't think that has anything to do with anything. Mount's all squared. I can't really see any signs of stress on this arm. This one, on the other hand, showed a lot of stress. Even twisting this mount in the subframe. So what I think I got to do is address lack of gussets here and the thickness of them, and obviously the thickness of the bottom portion of that mount, and go from there. So back from FD Texas, and finally got myself some material. Got some thicker stuff there for the mount's bottom. As I showed you before, that thing was twisting. So I'm gonna get my jig set up, and I was playing in SolidWorks a little bit to kind of confirm moving the arms forward obviously is going to work, but also mapped out the design of the arm. So if we use this as sort of a template, it's essentially going to be offset the same. I really liked how the Ackerman looked like in the simulation, but I'm going to make this longer and have the bend come out a little shallower, because there's actually a lot of room back here for the tire, and only have about a 32-degree bend here, and have the tubes come together. You'll see that. So now I just gotta make it real. First night picking away at it, got the front tubes made, gonna keep those straight, and made the bases, got myself some thicker steel like I said, made that bend. It's exactly to almost 32 degrees. I actually measured it. It's exactly what the model said on the first bend. Pretty pumped about that. And then made the clamshells, where you also have to cut the bottom half out of them to the standard Heim spacer size. And then I'm actually gonna clock them, still warm, clock them at an angle like that. So it'll kind of go in like that, and go in like that, and blah, blah, blah. So, get the idea? So I got the first portion of the first arm mocked up enough to put the Heims on and test fit it, basically. See what we're dealing with, see where I'm gonna have clearance issues and whatnot. So last night got both arms all welted up. They're about 90% done. I still am gonna add a cap gusset in a radius and some steering stops. What I'm going to do is find a pretty long nut here, weld it onto the arm, and then have a bolt come in contact with this caliper bolt, and have a nut so that it can be adjustable and lock it in where you want it. So when I was earlier, I had the tie rod hooked up, see what the travel was. This now has a lot more angle on the lead wheel, so much so that it would go beyond this. So if I had a 1-inch spacer, I could push that wheel out and get the max angle. Not really looking for that right now, plus, as you know, the bodywork doesn't fit the greatest, but I do have a plan you'll see. But on the upside is none of this will happen. When I had this hooked up and went to full lock for when this is the following wheel, it came nowhere near the frame rail. So now I just gotta go to the hardware store, find some hardware, get that going so it'll have a positive lock at full lock instead of rubbing on the control arm, which is never good. With that, we have a lot more casters. You can see that's a lot. Not as much as what the Fox looks like, but with that we get a lot of wheel flop. So when this is all together and with the stops and gusset, I'm gonna try and take some of that out of the knuckle there by either having to oogle these out and push the top of that in because we got room to help with that, because there isn't much up top that I can do to adjust that. It's already at kind of full negative, and adjusting it there, it's really kind of masking the problem if you do a static when they're straight negative camber to fix that. If you believe that's called KPI, correct me if I'm wrong. But if I can correct that, push that in, it'll end up having more negative camber at static, but in the right way, so that when this thing's drifting, it'll be a lot more planted. You can see, oh, that was my spacer I was using to, simulate where I want it to stop. Anyway, you can see it gets better. You're not always gonna be at full lock, but in here, you'll be kind of in this range here, and it's fairly flat. Not too bad. It's about what the Fox is. The Fox has a lot of caster. Got that cool little steering stop on there, and the heims are moving freely in the range of motion of the arms. Toe is way messed up because of the reasons. But now I got my buddy Max, since I don't have an 1.5 inch mandrel for my tube bender, bent these angles up for me so I can cut these up and put the cap gussets on the inside radius of these arms and assure that they're really tough. So that's the last step, and then basically align it, or check bump steer, align it, and then go from there and test it. October 5th will be the next drift day. Right, so had the OEM without spring strut there. Got my, well, it's not connected now because I ended up having to get a longer bolt, but I got my bump steer all dialed in. So even within 2.5 inches of suspension travel, it's only moving a little over 1/16 of an inch, which is definitely livable. So as you saw in the other clips, the KPI, so now I'm going to kind of oogle. What I was talking about was elongate these so that I can kick my spindle in more negative for more negative camber, and flatten out the wheel at full lock easier. Sweet. So it's back in one piece-ish again, and like I said, I'm gonna be testing this thing sans fenders and bumper for a couple of reasons. Sick of crunching the fenders, just in case it does break again, even though, I've said this before, I got a lot of confidence in these arms, but the wheel is also about 2 inches further forward from before, so I'm making the geometry work instead of making the geometry to fit the wheel arc. So I've had to adjust my steering stops. See right there. So comes close to the frame rail. still a pretty decent amount of angle. I did have to adjust them out a little bit. So it's not too shabby. Also elongated those holes like I said, so we got that pushed in just a bit so the wheel flop is not as severe anymore. Camber is probably right at 6.5, 7 degrees or so. So I think I had a good stopping point. I kind of roughed in the toe obviously to set my steering stops. But I think tomorrow I'm going to get this thing all the way on the ground and adjust the toe and maybe go for a little cruise around the block, wake up the neighbors a little. Thunder's doing that today, so I'll let the Fusion do that tomorrow. Even if it's raining, we'll make some noise, and if it's wet, then maybe I can even go to Mexico and see how it slides anyway. But I like to test that full grip, full lock, and it's a pretty big stress on the components, so it's the next day. Car's apart again, for a very good reason. Decided to gusset all these. It's been bugging me the last couple days and other people suggesting it, so just went ahead and pulled the arms and made it happen. So if these break, or at least the weak point should be the Heims now, which I probably said before, but yeah, these should be uber strong. Now I can throw them back on tomorrow and get it aligned, since everything else should be. I took my time welding it so that the Heims didn't get too warm, went back and forth on each arm. And I know it's not the prettiest, but that's what you get for MIG welding. So sooner or later I'll get in the TIG world, but for now, this'll do. Friday, and I've been setting the toe, been getting it close to zero, bombing around their block, and steering wheel's a little off. Try to overcompensate for that, but now I think I got the toe in. So if you're not familiar with toe plates, these are pretty convenient. I like to put a little weight here. I was using a battery, no jack stand. They got little magnets here to hold your tape measure. And then I can't do this with one hand, but you pull, I like to put my hoof on there and pull on each tape and measure it, see what the difference is. That's your total toe. As far as your steering alignment, I'm just setting it and then driving it and seeing where it ends up, trying to come in the garage as straight as possible, letting the car center the wheel, and then adjust the tie rods an even amount on each side to center up the wheel. Bunch of juicy fruiting around. The toe is staying in place. Took it around a bunch of left and tight right turns. No weird noises. Had some Heim popping on the last set of arms. I rushed those. But the toe stayed in place. Steering wheel's as close as I want to let it get. I can't even tell you what, it's maybe a few degrees out from center, but it's close enough where I'll know if something changes. or happens and it goes off, I'll be aware. So yeah, seems to drive around the neighborhood pretty good. I think the best it's ever have as far as neighborhood stuff. Like I said, October 5th, I'm gonna be at Wild Horse Pass Drift and Drag. Gonna test this thing out without fenders or a bumper. Now, what I have in store, as I was probably talking about earlier, the wheels are now 3 inches forward from like where the stock Fusion is. So the wheelbase is now 115 inches-ish. Haven't really measured that, just know that they're way forward. So my solution is right there. Some of you might not recognize that. Those are Rocket Bunny over fenders for FRS, BRZ, that Subaru thing, FR, Scion, whatever. You know what chassis I'm talking about. Toyota 86. The reason I bought them was because there was a lot of meat on the rear, and I needed to move the arc essentially forward on the car so that it doesn't look out of place. They're just ABS plastic. I got all 8 pieces for that car from Amazon for like $189 shipped. So I'm not gonna be afraid to cut them up. There actually is too much meat behind the arc, so I'm gonna do some trimming and playing with it. But for now, I'll show that in another video later. And I'm gonna actually do some Fox things because that thing's been neglected. I'm gonna check the bump steer on that, probably do a little more in depth on how that process goes in that video, and do its alignment because it's getting pretty nice out in Arizona and won't need AC soon. So I'd like to drive that thing more to work and whatnot. So stick around. Thanks for watching. Do the whole YouTube thing. Subscribe, like it. See you next time.